Bandicoot Retrospective. Press start to begin.
The year is 1997, and Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back was just released on the PlayStation. Just 1 month after the release of the first Crash game, Naughty Dog began development on its sequel. Isn't that insane? They had no idea how successful Crash was going to be, truly. They were so confident in their product that they immediately worked on a sequel. They already knew what some of the rough patches of the first game were, and over its 13-month development, Naughty Dog set off to create an improved Crash Bandicoot game. For one thing, co-creator of Crash Bandicoot Andy Gavin created an entirely new engine for this title called the Game-Oriented Object Lisp 2 engine, also known as Ghoul 2. This engine was a vast improvement over the engine used for the first game, being able to run 3 times faster, handle 10 times as many animation frames, and have 3 times as many polygons on screen. Crash 2, for what it is a technical marvel when it comes to the gaming industry at the time, and it's crazy to me that they made all of these technical improvements to the game in just over a year. Will these improvements be enough to make this game a great sequel, or will Crash Bandicoot just be a one-hit wonder? Let's find out. Picking up literally where we last saw them, this game's story begins with Cortex falling to the earth. Cortex ends up falling into a cave, illuminated by what Cortex recognizes as a power crystal. 2 years later, we see Dr. Neo Cortex and his new assistant, Dr. Engine, standing in their space station trying to think of what to do. Cortex has created a giant Cortex vortex that not only needs the power of the Master Crystal, but also the 25 slave crystals that are still on Earth. Unfortunately, the scientist doesn't have any more minions on Earth anymore, since Crash beat them all in the first game, and Cortex has no access to the Evolvo Ray. Cortex then gets the brilliant idea that if they don't have any friends left on the surface, they must find an enemy. Back on Insanity Island, we see Crash and his little sister Coco, with whom I have no idea where she came from, but don't worry about it, she's replacing Tawna. Coco's laptop dies and she sends Crash to go find a new battery. Crash goes off, but then suddenly gets transported to Cortex's warp room. Cortex comes over hologram and tells Crash that there are world-ending circumstances happening at this very moment. Very soon the planets will align, and Dr. Embryo is going to use this opportunity to harness so much energy that he is going to destroy the entire planet. The only way to prevent this is to collect all 25 power crystals in order to have the power to stop him. With his quest, Crash is off to get the crystals. Along the way, Crash also happens to find gems when he breaks all of the boxes in a stage. This gets the attention of Dr. Embryo. Brio tells Crash that Cortex is actually the evil one, and he wants to stop Cortex just as much as Crash does, as revenge for taking credit for all of his scientific breakthroughs. Brio instructs Crash to collect all of the gems in order to power a laser beam to destroy Cortex's spaceship once and for all. That's right, we're stuck in a 3-way war between Cortex, Brio, and Crash himself, who honestly just wants to go home. As Crash continues to gather the crystals and gems, Coco hacks into the hologram program and, in the nick of time, tells Crash what Cortex is really planning, confirming what Brio was telling Crash previously. Crash ends up defeating Engine and Cortex and then uses the 42 gems to help Brio shoot a laser at Cortex's space station, destroying the giant Cortex vortex once and for all. I absolutely love this story. The game's story went from a basic video game story with a damsel in distress and an evil scientist to stop, and became a multi-layered story of opposing evil scientist factions, deception, and fleshing out of amazing characters to boot. Good God, the story here is done perfectly, and I couldn't have asked for a more perfect sequel story. Just like Kirby's Adventure far accentuated Kirby's Dream Land in terms of story, Crash 2 far exceeds Crash 1. With all of that in mind, Crash 2's story gets my rating of an A+. Crash 2's gameplay took everything Crash 1 did and made it monumentally better. You still have your basic moves with your run, jump, and spin. The effort the developers put in to make these feel better than in Crash 1 really shows. If there is one way I can describe how Crash 1 feels to play, it's stiff. Well, they definitely took Crash Bandicoot to the chiropractor and gave him a ring dinger, because all stiffness that was in the original game is gone. They also added 2 new movement options in Crash's arsenal that seem small, but really make all the difference. They added a slide and a high jump. These 2 movement options are huge because now the platforming is even more engaging than they were before. Take this bit from the first bonus level in the game. To get up on this platform and get these boxes, you must jump on the ostrich and then very quickly slide and high jump onto the platform. This quick chaining of movement is very satisfying, and finding creative ways to use these new movement options is very fun. In the last video, I criticized the boss battles for not being very engaging and just becoming wait and attack fests, though a few of these bosses are still like that. I'm looking at you, Ripperoo. A lot of the boss fights in this game are much better at keeping the player engaged. Tiny Tiger's boss battle in particular is very good at keeping the player on their toes, as well as having the player strategize on the spot in order to lead him to his literal downfall. I replay boss fights from this game all the time just because they're that fun. With all of that in mind, Crash 2's gameplay gets my rating of an A+. This is the definition of a polished sequel. The one criticism I had with Crash Bandicoot's aesthetic was that it looked simple and blocky. Well, they must have taken a standard to Crash because boy howdy did they smooth the hell out of everything in this game. Crash looks better, Cortex looks better, the environments are more varied and look amazing. They also added probably the funniest inclusion in a Crash game, the death animations. In the last game, whenever you died, it cut to this unskippable cutscene that was just Crash spinning and dying in a black background. Boring and honestly pretty annoying after a while. In this game though, certain enemies or ways of dying will have unique animations for the many gruesome ways Crash can die. When conceptualizing Crash, it was pretty clear that the idea was to make a video game equivalent to Looney Tunes, and just this one inclusion cemented that. As for the music, oh man, what an upgrade. Whereas the first game had a few bangers, mostly the boss themes, this game is completely full of them. Almost every single song in this game is great, and I go back to listen to this soundtrack constantly. The biggest standout tracks definitely being Tiny Tiger's theme, Turtle Woods, and Cortex's theme. If only it were attached to a better boss fight. I also love that with Cortex's theme in this game, they kept the leitmotif of his boss theme from the first game. I love little touches like that. With all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back's presentation gets my rating of an A+. To complete Crash 2, there are a variety of things you must do. The most simple task is to collect all 25 power crystals in every stage and beat the game. Doing this will award you with a whopping 50%. This is obviously the easiest task considering you need to do this in order to finish the game, and it's not like the crystals are exactly well hidden. They're just somewhere in the middle of the stage. You must also find all 5 secret exits in the game in order to get another 5%. These secret exits are actually pretty cool to find and are hidden in very clever places. One of my favorites is an air crash where you must jump to this platform without getting on the jet ski in order to land on a platform containing the secret exit. They're cryptic, but not impossible to figure out. Defeating Cortex will net you another 3%, easy peasy, and of course, necessary just to beat the game. The last 42% of the game comes from collecting all 42 gems in the game. Let me tell you that getting gems in this game is so much easier than in Crash 1. For one thing, all you have to do to get the gem is to hit all of the boxes in a stage. They took out the requirement that you must do the stage deathless. Thank God, because if I had to do auto-runner stages like Barret without dying and getting all of the crates, I'd probably just cease to exist within this mortal coil. Hog Wild was bad enough. So is Crash 2 a much better game to complete than its predecessor? Absolutely it is. Not only is it much easier to complete Crash 2 over Crash 1, but it's also 1,000 times more fun. You get colored gems by finding secrets and solving secret puzzles. I remember how proud I was as a kid when I discovered that going through the first stage in the game, Turtle Woods, without getting a single crate would give you a special blue gem. That blew my mind and I felt intelligent for once in my feeble life. It's also just plain fun to get all of the gems and you get rewarded for it this time. Just like I mentioned in the last review, when you beat Cortex in Crash 1, you get the true ending as evidenced by the intro to this game, but if you take the effort to get all of the gems, you get a non-canon ending. That's ridiculous, but this time, Naughty Dog came to their senses and locked the true ending to the gem path, which makes it all the more satisfying when you pull it off. This is the Crash game I would recommend completing over and over again. It's just that good. Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back is the perfect sequel. It took everything the first game did right, made it better, and trimmed the fat when it came to the stuff that was mediocre or bad. With a story that is miles better and more unique than the original, gameplay that has been perfected, presentation that still looks and sounds good to this day, and an actual fun completion, with all of that in mind, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back gets my overall rating of an A+. Not only was this the first video game I've ever played in my life, it's still one of the best. Thank you everybody so much for watching this video, and if you like the Crash Retrospective, please like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next episode. We also have merch in the description below where you can get our shirts, mugs, and stickers to enrich your gameplay experience. I'd like to give a special shout out to Andrews Retro Games and Daniel Hawkins for being the most well-esteemed guests of them all. You could also become a channel member to get all of these videos when I'm finished editing them as opposed to when they're scheduled to come out. Next week, we'll be looking at the next Crash game in the lineup, Crash Bandicoot Warped! With that, I'm Bottles, and I bid you, my well-esteemed guests, adieu.